Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to introduce AIJAC fellow and experienced Israeli journalist Ehud Yaari for a quick chat in Australia today. Ehud, how are you?
Fine. Thank you for having me.
As always, it's great to have you. We'll jump straight into it. You know this country intimately. You've spent a lot of time here through the good times and the bad. In October 7 environment, global Jewry is under threat with threats of anti-Semitism, but the anti-Semitism experienced here in Australia is a little bit different and certainly different from the past. As an Israeli coming here, how does it feel being in Australia during this time?
Well, I do not feel myself any signs of anti-Semitism, except probably one on a previous visit when I was going to deliver a talk at the Sydney Institute. They had no notices. And I asked the director there, Mr. Henderson, what's the matter? Simply because I didn't know what the title of my talk is going to be. And he said, if we put the notice, then there will be a demonstration. Then I got it. Then the other time was when we had to give a talk with few colleagues at a shul here in Melbourne, and the venue was moved at the last moment, and there were about 40 policemen and policewomen outside, which I've never encountered before. On the other hand, I see, including in my own family, I see more a drift towards a more vocal, open, pro-Israeli stand. For example, my young nieces, first time, all of them have asked me for Magen David necklaces for Israel, and one of them goes to uni, etc. So it's mixed. I think my main impression, and I'm no expert on Australia, is that the attitude taken by the Australian government was not sufficient in order to deter the rise of anti-Semitism, and they were very, very careful, would be the word, to handle the protest, especially in the universities, and also sometimes on the street, which creates a general atmosphere of a certain degree of insecurity.
So you're sort of connecting the actions, or thus inaction, of government directly with the growing anti-Semitism that Australians have faced. Now, again, not only your experience with Australian people, you have spent a lot of time in and out of Parliament here in Australia for a number of decades. You've been here over the past 2.5 to 3 years of this current Labor government. It is no surprise to our audience that there's been, let's just say, a deterioration in the bilateral relationship. From an Israeli perspective, how did Israel perceive Australia before October 7, and has that changed, and if so, how?
The truth is, Israelis don't pay much attention to Australia, or for that matter, to many other countries except the United States, because as my wife is fond of saying, she's Aussie, she says the Israelis are interested in talking to one another rather than talking to people on the outside. I think the Israelis were shocked by the initial statement of Foreign Minister Penny Wong, who called after October 7th for restraint, as if she would have the same reaction had Australia been attacked by New Zealand or PNG, losing 1,200 people in a massacre with rapes and mutilations and babies taken captive, etc. That was the shock. In fact, I can tell you that before she came on her last visit to Israel, my advice, in this case solicited advice, to our government was to let Mrs. Wong understand that it's not the right time yet, especially because she didn't want to visit the Gaza envelope, the kibbutzim that were attacked, burned down, etc. And that was more of a lip service, which is true also of the very low-key visit by the Attorney General lately to Israel. Made no waves, made no impact, neither here nor in Israel.
So do you see, so we've got an election on May the 3rd. Is it your conclusion that there would be a different or a reset of the relationship back to what it was before if there is a change of government?
Well, it depends on the results. And I'm not very good at reading the polls. But also, I'm very doubtful as the accuracy of polls as proven lately in the presidential elections in the United States. I think there will be a negative tilt in case there is a minority government, Labor with Greens and Independents, and there will be a very favorable change in case the Liberal Party, the coalition, manages to win the majority. But I don't know what's going to happen.
And we see that as Australian Jews and as Zionist Jews, that Australia, well, the deterioration in the relationship has had a negative impact on Israel as well. The question is, if Australia wasn't on the radar before, I've just got back, a lot of people will stop you on the streets and ask how we're doing, because Israeli citizens are now aware of the anti-Semitism, or many are aware of the anti-Semitism that we're experiencing here. So the question is, what role can Israel play in terms of assisting the Australian Jewish community in their time of need?
You know, I'm often asked about that, and I don't have a good answer. I don't like it, but I don't have a good answer. I think Israel would do best if it gets to the point where it's generally widely understood to what extent we have prevailed in the war. Because this is the human nature. People treat differently somebody who manages to turn the table on their enemies, adversaries, and prevail, rather than being the poor victims of a surprise attack, in this case by Hamas. So, in my opinion, prevailing is key, because prevailing will also force the current government in Australia to take a different view. But another point, it's very important for the critical relations between Israel and the United States, whether it was President Biden or now President Trump, very different. The US, and I spend time every year in the US would like to feel that the great Anglo-Saxon nations are in line. UK, Canada, Australia. They feel better. Congress feels better if this is the case. And Australia at this time has chosen a different path.
It's a good segue to talk about war aims and move from Australia to Israel. So I'll tackle the Israel question in two parts. One focusing on the war that has, we've restarted hostilities in Gaza. The hostages, or a number of hostages, are still in Gaza and not returned home. In terms of those war aims that you were just discussing in the previous answer, how well is Israel going?
I think we have prevailed in a manner which was quite unexpected, taking into account the initial stage of the war, the post-October 7th. We could have been where we are now, probably 6 or 8 months ago, had the Prime Minister taken the appropriate decisions at different junctures during the war, but in my humble opinion, he has preferred to look at his own personal political calendar and his own personal problems, I mean the trial, etc., rather than allow the army to conduct the war at the pace and intensity that they were proposing. So when you wage a war, in this case against Hamas and Hezbollah, and you wait 2-3 months after you capture Gaza City and the northern part of the Gaza Strip before you go to the central sector, Khan Yunis. And then you wait another 3-4 months before you go to Rafah, instead of going simultaneously throughout the narrow strip called the Gaza Strip. 65 kilometers in all. That's the length of the border. And getting a quick result. It dragged on and dragged on and dragged on. The same is for Lebanon. On the Hezbollah front, the Prime Minister has committed two major, in my opinion, two major mistakes. One was he approved a suggestion by somebody in the army to evacuate the villages, I'm coming from one of them, up in the north along a narrow strip along the Lebanese border. That was an invitation to Hezbollah to fire into those villages. They wouldn't have dared fire into my home village, Betula, 4,000 civilians, had they been there. But once you announce that they are evacuated, and it's only the army there, they destroyed close to 50% of this beautiful village. And the same for many other places. That was a huge mistake.
You're suggesting now that the conditions are a little bit different? Either the change of the chief of staff or changes in the top brass in the army. Are things now different? Is the current operation in Gaza being conducted differently as to what it was 6 months ago by going city, then removing, then going to another place, then leaving?
No, because the idea now is not to occupy Gaza or capture Gaza. The idea now is to exercise, to apply as much pressure on Hamas as possible.
And you think
in order to, I think it's beginning to work, in order to conclude the deal. But we have to keep our eyes on the ball. And the ball is disarmament of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Or, alternatively, an offer of safe passage, get out, like Mr. Arafat left Beirut in September 82. This is where we need to get.
Can Israel force Hamas's hand in leaving without the pressure of the international community to get behind such an objective?
We have the Arabs with us. The Gulf states, Egypt, Jordan, Morocco. Everybody is with us on this.
And then who takes over?
You have, at least half a dozen good plans for what they call the day after. We are not yet there. Now, if you have the Egyptian proposal on reconstruction of Gaza and appointing a committee of technocrats, etc. You have a Palestinian Authority proposal, which is less convincing. But amongst the plans, there is an American plan. A good, thoughtful plan devised by a very experienced American general who has been on the ground for years now, supervising the security organs of the Palestinian Authority, General Fenzel. And this plan calls for recruiting about 10,000 young Gazans, training them in Jordan and Egypt, so they can serve as a security force policing the Gaza Strip the day after. All these plans are very good, except one. There is one point. They can all be ignited only when Hamas is not there and there is no threat that Hamas will shoot at whoever is coming. I'll give you an example. UAE, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Morocco, and others, I will not name them all, are willing to send battalions to help the recruits that the Americans will train in Jordan and Egypt. So you have a possibility of having some sort of a civil administration established in Gaza, backed by these forces. Of course, the Israeli army is outside the Gaza Strip, and it's very easy to intervene and do whatever it takes, and move from there. Anybody who thinks that Gaza can be reconstructed this way, that way, in a decade or two, is absolutely hallucinating. Gaza will stay in rubble for a long time. And we have to accept it. We have to do whatever it takes to make sure the population is minimally affected. But we are talking here about a very long process. Apart from that, the Palestinian Authority is not in shape to retake control that they've lost in the Gaza Strip, because they can hardly control their own territory in the West Bank. And when they sent lately their two best battalions, 101 and number 9, to this small refugee camp of Jenin, they couldn't take it for 4 weeks. And then the Israeli army had to send a company to do the job, to get rid of the armed bands that were financed by Iran and had the weapons smuggled from Jordan. So they are not in any shape an option for ruling Gaza. And apart from that, as I had the opportunity to explain to the American generals working on their plan, Gazans will view a force from the West Bank as an occupation force. They don't even speak anymore the same Arabic.
So you can see the vision, and there are multiple options for the day after, but just give the audience an idea of the time frame and sequence. So you've got military pressure to exert on Hamas to force their hand to do two things: to release the hostages, essentially give up their leverage, but also potentially leave the enclave. And the next step is to find someone else to fill that vacuum. We're getting up to Pesach now, so we're in April. How do you see that progressing over the next 3 to 6 months?
I believe, contrary to many others, that Hamas is in much deeper crisis than the Western press, including here in Australia, is conveying. They've already decided publicly to give up their governance, civilian governance of Gaza. We hear a lot of criticism from within Hamas against the decision to attack on October 7th. We see the number one rival of Yahya Sinwar within Hamas rise to the top, unofficially, but rise to the top. And he is the guy who's now taking decisions under negotiations over hostages, etc., etc., etc. There is an evolution in Hamas which is still playing out. But to say that it's impossible to get to the point where Hamas will lay down their arms or get out of Gaza, it's much too early. I think it's a real possibility. And I'll add, with your permission, one more thing. The same goes with Hezbollah. Because you see now there is a ceasefire in Lebanon. Hezbollah respects the ceasefire. And the Israeli army is enforcing it. Day in, day out. They see a Hezbollah trying whatever, not even to attack Israel, just to reestablish some infrastructure, he will be attacked. And the pressure within Lebanon on Hezbollah to lay down their arms and to dismantle their military wing is growing day by day. I can go to other places because you have the same in Iraq. The pressure on the what they call
PMUs,
the Popular Mobilization Forces, which are Iranian militias, and of course in Syria. Syria, there is no Syrian army anymore. The Hezbollah is being chased away from Syria. Same goes for the Iranian militias. Same goes for Palestinian armed organizations. So we have new situation all around. And in this context, in the wider context, Hamas doesn't have too many choices.
And it's a great segue because I would be remiss of me in the wider context if I didn't ask a question about Iran. So Iran is the main adversarial player in the region still, but with all of the different fronts that Israel was fighting on, the 7 fronts, and then the outcomes of the majority of those fronts, how bad has it been for the Iranians over the past 18 months? How much have they suffered geopolitically in the region? And what do you see their positioning, not just vis-a-vis Israel as a dominant player in the region, but also with the Trump administration in the United States? How do the Ayatollahs play the next 12 months?
The main thing is that Iran was stripped off, naked, of its strategy of what they used to call forward defense. We defend Iran through proxies in Lebanon, in Syria, Palestinians, Iraq, Houthis in Yemen, etc. The axis of resistance, as they call it, was not shattered. It was broken. To an extent, it was eliminated. So now in Tehran, you have a huge debate, which is not in the open, only sometimes it leaks to the Iranian media and the debates in the Iranian parliament, Majlis, and that is the following question. The following question is, do we send more good money, billions and billions and billions of dollars, which we do not have? Do we send it after the bad money that we have invested for 30 years and was eroded now? And that's a big issue. So I'm watching as much as I can to see, are they coming to the rescue of Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas? Not really, not big time. Do they try to stir trouble in Syria? Yes, but not with a lot of money, not with a lot of effort. In Iraq, they are on the defensive. And I think those in Iran who feel that this strategy devised by the late General Qasem Soleimani, this strategy is bankrupt. And therefore, we need to talk about the nuclear.
Correct.
And I think they will talk about the nuclear.
So do they accelerate or decelerate their program?
I don't see Iran accelerating.
So they're going to use that as a leverage tip for potential negotiations with the Trump administration?
Iran is now, not openly, but addicted to a slogan of what they call nuclear deterrence. We will get as close as we can to assembling a bomb. We will have all the capabilities, but we will not assemble. Because if we assemble, there are repercussions. And from this position, we will negotiate with Trump. They say now they will not negotiate directly, they will negotiate indirectly. It will be direct negotiations. They will have to negotiate. And then we will see whether they are willing to accept the terms that will be set not only by the Trump administration, but by the the Europeans.
Is there a formula for a renewed, and I don't want to call it a JCPOA because I'm hopeful that it's going to be so different to the original deal that you wouldn't want to call it that anyway. But if Trump is able to start the negotiations directly or indirectly, how does Israel play that out? So does Israel, from afar, assist in those? Would it be happy to come to a deal with the Iranians, or any deal that maintains their current nuclear infrastructure would be a bad deal for Israel?
Well, I think that the Americans, at least initially, will demand dismantlement of much of the current Iranian nuclear program. The JCPOA is anyway about to expire, so it's not going to serve as a basis. The International Atomic Energy Commission, Rafael Grossi, the Argentinian, are taking a very tough line on this. So I think they will have to redraw a new agreement which imposes on Iran much more restraint in its nuclear research than was the case so far. And the Iranians, from a financial point of view, they cannot afford to stay the course for too long. The rial, the Iranian currency, is now at the lowest level ever. And now with new American moves to prevent Iran from using Iraqi banks, from exporting energy to Iraq, efforts successful to curtail oil export to China, the economic situation in Iran is going to be worse. Listen to the Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei. He keeps saying that the front now is the domestic front. And I don't think Iran really has a choice but to seek the best deal they can have. And you have the team there, which is pro-deal, especially for Minister Arakchi, and the ex-Vice President Zarif behind the scenes. They will go there. They will try to go there as proud as possible, without being seen, perceived domestically and outside as having bowed to directives from abroad, but they will go there.
Cool. Time for one final question. It's a question that doesn't get asked enough, and I think it should. There's no doubt that this is an international audience this is going to go out to, and we in Australia is one of the most Zionist diaspora communities, and now our heart is so meshed, it's so meshed with Israel, Am Echad B'Lev Echad, and we've personified that and illustrated that. But one question that we don't ask is that Israel's faced its longest war by far. The hostage situation has caused another very clear rift inside Israeli society. Judicial overhaul is back on the agenda. Elections due sometime next year. Where do you see Israel's trajectory through its citizenry and its people? It's fought a very hard war and it's fought valiantly. A number of reservists and Miluim have been called up and fought for their country. There's a lot of pride there, but there's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of anguish, and there's a lot of trauma. Do you see positive things on the horizon for Israeli society?
Yes, because I think what we have now, and I will be, with your permission, very blunt, we have the current dysfunctional government of Israel fighting the state of Israel at wartime. Bibi calls it the deep state. It's not the deep state. He's fighting the state of Israel, the institutions of the state of Israel, the tradition, the political culture of Israel. He's trying to dismantle everything for his own purpose. He's turned his own party, the Likud, which was a liberal, right-wing, decent party, into a fan club. So in this contest between the current government of Israel and the state of Israel, that is the citizens of Israel, will win. Whether it will take millions on the street or some other way, I don't know. But he's not going to be able to vanquish Israel in the same way that Hamas was unable to do it.
So essentially, you can conclude that if the citizenry is going to be able to achieve that, there is an argument to say that Israel can be stronger through its trauma and through the chaos of the past 18 months, both economically and socially, not immediately, but in time.
I think Israel will undergo a process of healing, which is not simple. It will take time, but the precondition for healing is to change the distorted attitude of the current government to the state, to the citizens, and even to the army. Just an example. Throughout the war, the channel which is unofficially the voice of the Prime Minister, it's all talk shows, was attacking the army and its commanders day in, day out, Channel 14, day in, day out. Where else did you see a situation like this, in which the Prime Minister's organ is attacking the army under him? And that was the case, and it's unacceptable.
And on that note, thank you so much for your time,
Welcome.
Ehud. It is always such a pleasure to host you in a country that not only I love, but you love too. Not only are we aspirational here for better times ahead for the Australian Jewish community, but most importantly, we are so hopeful that that healing process in Israel can start soon. And I have no doubt, like you, that Israel will certainly prevail and persevere. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you.